Hello and welcome to another episode of 0 to 60 and welcome to a sunny winter's morning here in Queensland. It is a lovely day, which is why I thought I'd film some outside. So today's episode we're talking about my coilovers and I wanted to try and, I guess, justify why I've gone the route that I have gone. But before I get into that, I need to ask for your opinion on suspension as well, because suspension is, without a shadow of a doubt, and it's a personal preference type thing. What works for some people will not work for others. And this video is mainly going to be focusing on this particular brand of coilover and my opinion on it once we get it all in the car and set up. So if you've got a different set, if you've got BCs, you've got KWs, if you're running just upgraded shocks with different spring rates, please list it in the comments below and list your opinion on how it changed your vehicle. And more importantly, list any negatives that come from it as well. The biggest issue with aftermarket stuff is, well, realistically, the biggest issue with making a car handle, you lose a bit of your ride comfort. So how much ride was lost when you've upgraded your suspension, or was it still just as good? That's the sort of information I'd love to see in the comments. Now, a bit of background on myself and what we used to do in business for the last 7 or 8 years. And one of the main reasons I'm quite nervous about giving my opinion about suspension, we actually ran quite a large motorcycle suspension shop. We actually ran a motocross team as well. But the main tech that worked with us for 7 years, he actually did quite a lot of time. I think he worked for MCA for about 10 years working on their Gold Series. And if you're from Australia, the MCA Gold Series suspension is without doubt the best suspension you can buy for your vehicle. The level of development those guys do and knowledge they have of chassis and how to get it to do what the customer needs it to do is unrivaled in my opinion. So if you've got an absolutely unlimited budget, go and get some MCA Golds for your car. You won't get anything better. But if you're a bit of a gypsy like I am, you need to look at some cheaper options, and that's what we're going to be focusing on here. So when I was working with the ex-MCA tech who worked with us for 7 years, I learned a lot from him about suspension setup. Even in our business, we had a suspension dyno, and we would make modifications, make piston designs, shim stacks. We did a lot of work, different needles, seats, and we would test it as well. So we weren't just fitting off-the-shelf parts like a lot of suspension specialists. We were actually developing different settings and then testing it how it affected the shock. Although I wasn't really doing any of the technical work, I did learn a lot during that process. And again, the main thing I learned from the 7 years working in suspension was what's right for one person is not right for everyone else. So again, please let me know your opinion below. But because of that, that's why I've decided to go with these particular coilovers. They are the Geckos. They're one of the cheapest ones I could get delivered to my door from an Australian seller. I literally nearly clicked the button to buy some BCs. I have BCs in the Evo. They weren't terrible when they were out of the box, but we actually got them revalved a few years ago now by our suspension tech. And once he revalved them, they were amazing. And he said he had a similar valving in that to what they'd run in the MCA Golds for Targa cars, and it really worked for mine. And that's something else you need to keep in mind with the cheaper coilovers. You might not be happy with them initially, but you can get them revalved down the track. And then if you go to the right place to get them revalved, you can do some cool stuff. Now, I'm gonna go into more so the features on these once we get them unboxed, but the main thing you need to keep in mind when you're thinking about buying coilovers or changing your suspension is what you want from it yourself. Now, with this vehicle here, and I'll try and play up some clips, but the main things I'm trying to sort out with changing the suspension is basically just get it safer when I'm doing the 100 to 200 runs. And you can see when I roll the power on aggressively, the weight transfer is horrific. The way the weight transfers to the back and lifts the front up is ridiculous for a sports car. And then the way that it'll basically wallow from left to right while you're on full power. And it's a weird thing to be in, because when you're doing a full hard acceleration, you need to add quite a lot of steering input to keep it going in a straight line. It's kind of exciting, but also terrifying at the same time. But also, I mean, that's what I want to fix, but also this is a daily driver. I need it to be comfortable, I need it to be quiet, I need it to be compliant, and I don't want to compromise. I don't want to make it too stiff. Now, the reality is, knowing what I know, I could probably fix those problems by just replacing the shocks. These shocks are weeping. Now, when a shock weeps, you lose the volume of oil inside the shock, and then you basically lose your dampening effect. And that's why it's so bouncy. Hopefully you might have seen in one of the previous videos, it bounces like an old American car, and it's just due to the amount of oil that's in the shock is not right, and it's not dampening like it should. They are no good. They need to be thrown away. I guess it's not a true reflection on what this vehicle would be like if they were in good condition. but that is the reality of my car. Now, as I said, I could have fixed most of these problems by simply putting a good set of shocks in there, but because of the way the channel's evolving, and I was kind of curious to have a better look at these geckos because there's not a lot of information about them, I thought it'd be interesting to go the coilover route. If we do want to go crazy with them, I could modify these, revalve them down the track, and I thought it also might be pretty cool to have adjustable ride height if I want to be a stance boy for a week or two or something strange like that. So it's going to give me a lot of options to play with down the track, and to be honest, they're not much dearer than a set of shocks and springs that I had to go anyway. These were 1,250 Australian delivered to the door. As I said, I was trying to buy them through an Australian seller. I thought they were going to get dispatched from Australia, but they come from Taiwan, although it was shipped by DHL, so it was only about 3 days to get them from the time I paid the money, which is pretty good. Anyway, I guess we need to get inside, get out of this hot sun, the winter sun, get the box opened and see what these gecko coilovers are really like. Okay, well, there is one thing left to do. Open up and see what they're actually like. Now, the main thing I didn't like about these geckos are the colours of them. They're a green and purple. I figured if I really don't like them, I'll just paint them black. But hopefully you won't be able to see them much behind my big brakes, which I've also ordered, by the way, now. Okay, so let's get them opened up. I'm kind of nervous about this. I thought I'd open up on camera so you can see my horrified look in person. See if they sent the right ones. They're packaged just like BC's. There's something I didn't realise until I actually inquired about BC's. The rears are not adjustable, not on the basic kits anyway, which is a bit, well, not dampening adjustable. And I assume these are going to be the same. Again, I couldn't find a lot of information out about the geckos, which is another reason why I thought I'd give them a go. Yeah. Oh, they are green and purple. All right. Bearing, the top plate bearing should be a spherical bearing. Can't quite see. Bearing spins more freely than I would have expected it to for a brand new one. But all in all, the most important thing, the paint finish on them is actually quite good. And I say that's important because that's going to be the main thing that stops these corroding when they've been on the car for 5 or 6 years. You don't want any bare metal surfaces. And it's something that I didn't like about the STX coilovers, which are, a lot of people reference to them as a cheaper KW. The reality is, and we worked with quite a few motorbike shock bodies, and those zinc coated bodies just don't last as well as a powder coated one. But yeah, first impressions on the front shock, everything looks fine. Rebound adjuster. Doesn't have as much tension on it as a BC. I'll count all the clicks separately when it comes time to install it. Let's just have a quick look at one of the rear shocks, see what they are like. Yeah, with the rears, as I said before, they're not adjustable, not dampening adjustable. They are base height adjustable, which doesn't do anything because the spring's not even there. But yeah, again, about the only thing you can really comment on is the finish. The lower sections in green are powder coated. The actual shock body itself is anodized by the looks of things. Got some markings on it, which means a human has touched it at some point. Initial impressions, they are very, very similar to a BC. Now, if you're completely new to car suspension, or any suspension for that matter, all the shock absorber really does is some people call them dampeners, and it dampens the spring or the wheel bouncing. So on the end of this shaft, there'll be a piston. That piston traditionally will have 8 holes, 4 holes for rebound and 4 holes for compression. And when it's on a compression stroke, it will force oil through the compression holes and then onto the shim stack for the compression shim stack. And it's those shims restricting the amount of oil that can go through the piston, which gives you the dampening curve. And it's quite hard to push in, but I just also wanted to make sure that it popped back out. And actually, sorry, and it's the same for the rebound. There's basically the shim stack, which restricts the amount of oil that can flow through the piston on the rebound. On top of that, they fill them with oil. Good shocks will be filled with oil, and then they charge them up. The reason they pressurize them, and both of these do have warnings about being gas filled, putting the oil under pressure reduces the chance of cavitation around the piston. I'll see if I can hopefully cut in some clips of piston cavitation.
Now, you want to see something really neat?
Yeah.
Here, letting the nitrous out. It's going to cavitate. There it goes. Cavitation. Oh, look at that.
And that's the biggest issue with an emulsion shock, or a shock that isn't actually pressurized with gas. You'll get cavitation. The second you have cavitation around the piston, you've got no dampening. So all in all, these actually look quite good. Yeah, I'm actually quite impressed with them. For the money, it's $12.50 delivered. It's not a lot of money, and that's something else you need to keep in mind. Now, the biggest thing, I guess the next upgrade from this style of shock in money would have been something with an external reservoir. The big reason to go for an external reservoir is it increases the amount of oil inside the shock. Now, the big thing with that is obviously you've got quite a few, well, if you can imagine the forces that are going on inside as that piston slides up and down the shock body, you've got the shims all sliding together and rubbing on each other. There's a lot of wear that goes on inside a shock absorber like this, and the oil gets contaminated. The BCs that were on my Evo, when we got them revalved, they'd done about 10,000 kilometers, and when we stripped it down to change the oil, it was filthy. So 10,000 Ks on a coilover is enough for it to need to be serviced, and that's something else that a lot of people don't realize. Coilovers like these, which are really initially designed for the racing world, they were not designed to do mega road miles, although a lot of them will completely do road miles fine. If you're going to get something like this, just keep in mind that you really do need to look into servicing them, and in my opinion around that 10,000 kilometer mark. Keep the oil fresh. I'm sure they don't use, in BCs or these, I'm sure they're not using the best oil available, just purely down to money. But if you do get it serviced locally, get some decent quality oil in there, and you might even get some more life out of them. But yeah, okay, I think from here, what do we do? Might get the car in, get up on the hoist, make sure there's nothing too strange going on, and work out what we've got to do to get these bad boys fitted. So I just went to try and start the 540 to get off the hoist, and even jump starting it, it still won't bloody start. So I've got to leave that battery charging. We were actually working on that, doing the wheel bearing till quite late last night. Actually, we didn't even finish it last night, and we must have left the doors open because, or maybe it's just done its battery drain thing. But the battery is dead flat, so I'll let that keep going because I'm never pushing that ever again, which is a bit annoying. But anyway, but this here, I've actually unpacked the whole Gecko kit, and unlike the BCs, and correct me if I'm wrong, it hasn't come with any sway bar link pins for the front. So hopefully the positioning on this little notch there is going to work with the standard sway bar link pin. But yeah, other than that, it did come with a semi-decent looking instruction manual, and then it come with another little bit of information which is printed in your typical Chinese manufacturer font, which is just about installing the rear spring spacers and shims. Look, I'm going to end this video off here. In fact, I'm going to end this video off here because it's probably getting too long as it is. But all I did want to do, I just wanted to get it in and just make sure, get the car up on the hoist, make sure it was going to basically bolt up and not going to have any issues. Hopefully it's going to be fine. As soon as we've got Dave's car started, we'll get it out and get my car in. But in the meantime, I'm going to go and get this video edited so I can get it up today. Sorry we didn't get a video up yesterday, but the wheel bearing was just a bit of a nightmare on the 540. Look, initial impressions, the finish on the Geckos is actually quite nice. It should be all pretty resistant to corrosion, which, as I mentioned earlier, is something that's quite important. I don't particularly like how easily the bearing spins on there. It may be a full-on roller bearing, not a normal spherical bearing in the strut top. I didn't go for adjustable strut tops, so they don't actually need to pivot or slide. I just wanted fixed because, again, I'm not going anything too crazy. I'm not setting it up as a race car. I just want a little bit better traction for on the road. Anyway, guys, look, Gecko coilovers, they're the ones I've gone for. It was a price thing, but it was a price thing knowing that worst case scenario, I can get them revalved. And I really wanted to see what they were like compared to BCs, because these are the closest thing I've seen to BCs. A couple of guys did actually guess that I'd bought max speeding rods. We actually, one of our vehicles does have max speeding rods in it. It's a vehicle you don't see very often. They were an early set of max speeding rods. They cost something like $280. They were so cheap it was ridiculous, but they were also, you get what you pay for with those max speeding rods. I wanted to have something that's definitely got the rebound adjustment on the fronts, like the BCs, and something we can take apart, service and modify if we need to, and these are serviceable shocks. So they're going to do fine, even if they're not that good out the box, but I'm interested to see what they're like out the box, which you guys will see hopefully in 2 or 3 episodes time. All right guys, thank you very much for watching. Until the next one, peace.